Hey, everybody, it's Becky Droz. Thank you for joining me on the Gorilla HR podcast. I am excited. Today, our guest is Mallory Nelson, and I am going to describe Mallory as a disability cultural curator. I saw that use somewhere, and I was like, I think that perfectly sums her up. And so, Mallory has an amazing background. She's a creative talent and really does a lot of amazing advocacy work as well. And so, I'm so excited to have her come on and chat with me. So, Mallory, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so glad you're here because I have been able to spend some time with you and chat with you. And you always offer these little tidbits of information to me. And then I'm left wanting more and having all of these questions. And so I tricked you into coming on so that today I can ask you all of those other questions.
How clever of you.
I'm conniving like that. So, one of the things that I learned about Mallory is that she has her MFA in costume design from Carnegie Mellon, and she has done some pretty amazing work in the realm of costume design and performance. And so, one of the things I think is so cool about that is that you have done some incredible work where you have performers with disabilities and you are able to do design and really transform these costumes where you are really incorporating adaptive aids and tools where it is like truly part of the costume. So that is one of the things that you've done that I think is so amazing. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that experience and how you do that and all of that good stuff.
So, I have been working with they're called the Family Theater Company now. They're a disability affirming theater company out of Denver, Colorado, and they've been around for over 30 years. Just as long as the ADA has been
Yeah.
around is the same time that they went into full production and have survived through the tedious things that make theater companies not make it through.
Yeah, that's a tough field.
Definitely a tough field. So the best part about the Family Theater Company is they cast all disabled actors. So the entire cast is a gambit of disabilities, working from perhaps you've got your wheelchair users that are ambulatory and your wheelchair users that are non-ambulatory beyond the wheelchair. You've got deaf and blind and Parkinson's and head injuries and cerebral palsy, just more disabilities than you can think of when
Yeah.
you think of things. So I got started with family when I was just a senior in high school. I got brought in as the assistant costume designer on the first show I did, Once Upon a Mattress, with them.
In high school, you were doing costume design.
Yeah, right. My senior year was the year that I was assisting on.
Wow.
After I got done with my first year of undergrad, I said to them, "Hey, I know your costume designer is moving to another state, so might you be interested in taking me on?"
You're like, "I think I know somebody."
So yeah, and they were like, "Well, we didn't hear anything bad about you, so let's give it a shot." So I costumed my first professional theater show with an entire cast of disabled actors just out of my first year of undergrad,
That is
and
amazing.
continue to work with family for as their costume designer for 5 years.
What is a design that you did that you're most proud of?
Well, there's been a lot. Every show kind of has its own special qualities to it, and things that I found interesting and engaging and fun to design. For instance, the first show I designed was the Pajama Game. Doris Day, I believe, played it in the movie. And I had a lot of fun creating the look for the factory because it was about a pajama factory. And
Mm.
so everybody's got their work outfits on, and it's kind of that 1950s. Think of the Lucille Ball's Chocolate Factory
Yeah.
episode. If
Yeah, yeah.
anybody's seen that, I took directly from that and put everybody in gingham across the entire cast.
It's so funny because as soon as you said that, that is what I visualized.
Right? I did a rainbow of gingham, so it wasn't just the
Love,
blue or
love, love it.
the fun part was I had for the first time working with this actress Kathleen. And Kathleen is a bilateral leg amputee. So she's
Mhm.
missing her leg both above and below. The time I met her, she was no longer using prosthetics, so she was primarily a wheelchair user.
Mhm.
And we made little fake legs for her so she would feel comfortable being seen on stage without traditional prosthetics, and that was kind of a
Oh,
fun feature in that production,
very cool. That
which
is
can drag us all the way over to the Wiz
FYI,
because it's more gingham.
that's the trick then to having a successful, like, show is, like, you need gingham involved.
Gingham is definitely a something to look for.
Yeah.
Something to look for. I ended up using the same gingham dresses to create Dorothy's look in the Wiz, but not just the blue gingham again. I did all the blue, red, and yellow gingham were used on Dorothy's dress, making it a little non-traditional. But working with the Wiz, you've got the great characters of the lion, the scarecrow, and the Tin Man, which are all epic costumes to create.
Yes. And then you're taking that a whole level up.
Yeah. For instance, the lion I built out of a whole bunch of different fake furs. I'm more fake fur than pro real fur. We don't do that.
Yeah.
The cool part is the actor is blind and he has glass eyes. So his optometrist actually made us glass lion eyes. A funny little story is glass eyes aren't balls. That's not the shape of them. There's curvature on the front to kind of create the shape of what we see of a
Yeah.
lens. And the back of it's kind of got a whole bunch of different things going on. His optometrist was still kind of fitting the eyes to him.
Okay.
And so we were rehearsing this scene where, because it seems like a great idea to have blind people jump off rocks, we have him singing and jumping off of a rock. And as he lands, pop
Oh
goes
my
the
gosh.
eye, skittering across the floor.
Oh my gosh.
The musical director just scurries out from behind the piano and scoops it up and brings it back to him.
Like, "I think you dropped this."
Yeah. And we always
Wow.
say only in a family show can someone lose an eye and nobody's going to the hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the work that they're doing, and they're still out there doing these shows.
Yeah, they grew from originally when I started working with them, they were only doing one show a year, one
Okay.
big musical in the summer. Now they've got multiple productions that they do throughout the year. Yeah, they I was actually out there in October last year to see my friend Greg's production. He was directing Funny as a Crutch. And I had to get out there because he's Greg Vigil is the founder of Family
Okay.
in my book. There's several other founders as well, but Greg's just like of this all wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this kooky theater loving,
Yeah.
acting, singing man that wanted to be on stage.
Very cool. Now, I know you have also worked in some other organizations and doing costume design. And we talked a little bit at one point about some of your work where they weren't necessarily very accommodating or willing to engage in the whole interactive process with individuals with disabilities. And so the question really becomes, what advice do you have for individuals with disabilities who are looking for some sort of accommodation so that they can do their job? Like, they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they know what they need to do, they just may need some sort of aid or something to be able to knock it out.
Yeah. Well, it's tricky. It's the theater industry is a very ableist
Yeah.
industry. It's I mean, what are we doing? Putting actors on stage and dance and having them dance and sing around depending on the production. And that requires a lot of ability. I find it interesting. I've always been Googling the term disability theater for decades now. And I went from kind of seeing what recommendations were for audiences to start getting
Mhm.
access for audiences so that they had hearing loop assistance so they can hear the
Yeah.
productions or get their wheelchair into the audience in the first place
Yeah.
or having audio description of what's going on stage. All of that was kind of still like barely in its infancy a couple decades ago.
Yeah.
Now the audiences are much better supported and known about, and it's kind of a given that this show and space needs to be accessible for the audience.
Do you think that that's a result of the people demanding it, or do you think legislation or a combination or something else?
Well, a lot of it is the disabled people showing up.
Yeah.
It's really not thought of until the disabled person has entered the arena and everybody's recognized that this is a problem.
Yeah.
I can't say that anybody's thinking about kind of legislation or rules or regulations or things. The theater is kind of its own ecosystem of
Mhm.
what it wants to do versus what the world around it is necessarily constructing.
Well, then I'm glad that people are showing up and asking for what they need.
Yeah, so we get the audience, finally starts getting geared in. Then it becomes getting the disabled actor on stage.
Yeah.
And that's the next thing that's kind of been thought of in the last decade a little bit more.
So it's I think you're right then. It's and seeing a shift where for the characters who are disabled or whatever characteristic that we're looking for actors who already fill that spot and fill that need versus creating something fake.
Yeah, it's been a long haul, and it's still happening where characters that have disabilities are not cast by actors who have
Yeah.
disabilities. So that's kind of the forefront of where everybody's at this point, which leaves a lot unexplored or just
Mhm.
neglected.
Maybe a little bit of both,
Yeah.
whether like I think it comes down to is it intentional or unintentional? Like again, people with disabilities are showing up and saying like, hey, we're here. Like
Yeah, right.
put us in the show. Like,
But this leads to the fact that there's been no consideration about a disabled person in behind the scenes,
mhm,
whether it's the design work being done or this building of, for me, costumes, building the costumes or wardrobe or various different roles that a person can play in the production that's not on stage has
yeah.
been extraordinarily neglected and not. Well, it's really hard to show up to remind people that these things need to be done because it's not as easy as buying a theater ticket to be like, I'm a costume designer with a disability and this stage backstage needs to be wheelchair accessible for me.
Right.
Yeah, so
But
getting
why can't it be? Like, that's the whole thing. Like, and I have this conversation because obviously on the HR side of it, and, for years talking to employers, it's like, well, engage in the interactive process. Like, if somebody needs an accommodation, like, find out what problem are you solving for, and get suggestions and get recommendations, and like look for that thing. So, why can't the stage be accessible for somebody in a wheelchair? Why
yeah,
can't you get there?
why can't we get there? Well, it's also we're in an industry that's on a budget. On a budget and usually just barely finding spaces that they can afford to work out of.
I know, and that brings it,
It's
like, with that whole
excuses. Lots
interactive
of
process, and
excuses.
then, like, what's an undue hardship? And so to say, like, because you're on a budget and you can't afford something, and I understand that cost and budget is a very real thing, but I feel like it becomes an excuse versus are we really evaluating is that this isn't a true undue hardship?
Yeah. Like, for instance, I, was hired to do a production of Next to Normal, which is a fun musical about mental health and a family struggle with a mother that's dealing with mental health conditions and the journey the family takes in this story. It's a fun musical. I enjoyed it. They had these beautiful drawings and this entire elaborate plan to put an elevator in once they reached the funding goal to put it in. So
Mhm.
the intention was there to get the space accessible, and they wanted the space to be accessible because they wanted to bring in disabled designers and artists and actors to be in their spaces, but they weren't there yet. But they were still willing to take a risk on having an out of time designer with a disability come in,
Yeah.
which was great opportunity. But the plan on how I was to work in the space and in the city was a little unthought about. I don't believe they'd actually had a guest designer come from out of town for costumes before, is my first
So
assumption.
there's already the first like, okay, here's an issue that we got to work through.
Yeah, they bring in guest actors all the time.
Okay.
That's something they're used to. So a guest is not unusual, but the guest designer was unusual. I think they don't have a costume shop in their space.
Okay.
They set me up originally in what was the off stage space slash dressing room slash kitchen
Definitely a multi-use area.
slash laundry rooms. It had just about everything you could find in there. And they were like, you can do the fittings in this room, but also we're going to be rehearsing on stage and the actors are going to be flying in and out of the stage exit.
So here, use the space, but people are coming in and out.
Yes,
Yeah.
which pushed me to go ahead and use their old costume storage space. They had just
Okay.
gotten rid of their, but it was up a flight of stairs, which was a choice I was making because everything was up a flight of stairs. The
Yeah.
offices were up there, the break room was up there, the spaces that everybody else was going when they weren't on stage was upstairs, which worked out better because I had privacy to actually fit people in their costumes, which is a
Yeah.
big
So when
thing.
people are like changing their clothes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And in their kind of, very, very exposed state
Yeah.
because you're, you know,
Yeah.
pulling, prodding, and picking and nuancing what the costume's going to look like on them. But yeah, it was not the most accessible experience for me when I was being guest designer out of town.
So everything you needed to be able to successfully perform your role and create these costumes was inhibited by the fact that it wasn't accessible for you physically.
Yeah,
Yeah. Which is unfortunate.
it's very unfortunate. Yeah, one of the stranger things was how they expected me to shop the show. I'm pretty sure they're used to having designers that have their own cars
Hmm.
and their own spaces of homes and stuff to pull costumes into, and they expected me to shop the show off the bus, which was just, I was
I'm
like,
sorry. I
okay,
just can't help but laugh. Like,
first
really?
first I have to get over my like anxiety about public transportation
Oh my gosh.
and just be like, okay, I'm gonna do this is gonna be fine.
So I'm supposed to go visit all these different places and pick things up and have costumes and bring them back to a central spot. Like,
The cool part about Minneapolis is Target is based out of there. So their seconds store where they're getting rid of pieces that are samples or stuff that was tagged wrong, or just like all the stuff at Target was just at super discounted prices, which was great. So there's this great Target discount store that was underneath a thrift store that I also rated, and I just got all of this clothing
yeah.
when I'm in my wheelchair and I've got bags stuffed underneath and I've got bags hanging off the back, and it's a hill to get back to the train and bus system from that spot. And it was humorous. I was always just kind of looking at it humorous. I got a great picture of me in the wheelchair. I was like some
Yeah.
random person. I was like, excuse me,
I'm trying to get up there.
but can you take a picture of this?
Yeah, I can only imagine like going shopping and going thrifting and going to the discount stores, getting everything you need, and then sitting there in your wheelchair with just like bags of stuff and no support to get where you need to go.
No, yeah, and being like, okay, I gotta get up this hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literal hill.
See, again, though, when I think of like the whole concept of reasonable accommodation and the interactive process, like they brought you in because of your creative skills to do the costume design. Like you have a master's degree in this and you have incredible experience doing it. Like that's what you're there to do. So the additional expense to facilitate some transportation and supply, like again, I don't know their budget, but that just seems like something that wouldn't necessarily reach the threshold of being undue hardship in my mind. But I didn't get to make that decision for them. So So what do you want companies to know, like, as they have this whole concept, and particularly in the theater space, like, what can we do, what can I do as an ally to say, okay, we need to get more individuals with disabilities engaged both in performing and in all of those roles behind the scenes?
After all these years of costuming and showing up, I still don't have a great answer
Okay,
for
that's
that.
okay.
Once the disabled person's there, it's you're behind already on getting the accommodations set up. But accommodations should always be some of a discussion between the disabled person and the person, the director or the stage
Yeah,
manager
for
or
sure.
the production manager, or never, oddly, HR is never really around
Which to me
in theater
is
land.
a miss, like, because I think that, well, actually, one, I like that directors are engaging, like they should, because they know more the ins and outs of the work that needs to be done, probably more so than somebody in HR. But I think the whole thing is like bring in a few people to make it happen and to have the conversation. I think you're exactly right that it's everybody coming together to figure out, okay, how do we solve for this, whatever the thing is. It shouldn't be that hard. I feel like too many people are afraid, like certainly on the HR side and organizations I've talked to where they're like, what do I say? What do I do? And I was like, you have a conversation with a human. Like, like that's where I think people are afraid. And it's kind of like,
Well,
okay, well, get over yourself. And like, you're talking to a human, just talk to a human like you would.
I mean, at the same time, I'm coming in kind of afraid because I've just managed to get hired, which
Yeah.
is great. And
Yeah.
the anticipation is perhaps I do a good job and I get hired back again. But to start asking for needs that are not part of the original contract, the like for instance, I need to have someone else that's carrying costumes around for me. That's generally not something that that a costume designer is asking for
But that's exactly it though. Like that's the secondary piece. You know what I mean? Your creative ability is what they're hiring, not your ability to move a costume around.
right. The thing is they are the assumption. It's these low level assumptions of what the costume designer just does without being asked.
Yeah. I don't know.
Um,
I think you're giving them more grace than I want to.
I always do. It's really a problem. I got to learn how to give them the hard hand and be like, "This is how
Yeah.
this is going to get done."
Okay, maybe not quite that approach, but but I just I don't know. I think that individuals are all different and there are things that they can do, and I think that there are things that organizations can do to help people fully deliver in what they're good at. And I don't think that having the conversation about a reasonable accommodation should be so hard.
Maybe it's been I was like, let me just blame myself.
Ugh.
I mean, because if you haven't had experience being around people with disabilities, it feels very foreign. It's like, how do I ask this actor, where do they have no sensation?
Mhm.
That's a weird question for someone to ask anybody, except for it's
Yeah.
not when you've got someone who is paralyzed
Yeah.
and there's a line where their feeling starts and stops. And
Yeah.
knowing to ask those questions and find solutions, and knowing that some of the costume pieces aren't going to work because of the sensation or the lack of sensation. It takes a disabled person in the actual like mix
Mhm.
to help advocate for a disabled person.
Yeah, because you bring your own experiences.
Because you bring your own experiences, and having comrades in the industry is crucial. The one thing I keep looking at with getting all these disabled actors on stage is I'm not seeing the support system for them of another disabled person also reaffirming. They're very alone in this kind of like game of trying to ask for what they need without being overbearing or without asking for something.
So maybe like what we need then is just more advocates who have some experience to help kind of just guide and facilitate the process.
Yeah, or it's the notion that there'd be somebody in the production team that is disabled, that is maybe in the production staff, the actual office staff,
Yeah.
actually hiring people anywhere. It's just like,
I feel like we could substitute. It's almost like with anything. I mean, to me, this is the whole concept of like diversity, equity, and belonging is that we need people who have different experiences who can help advocate for others and help make people feel that they fully belong and that they can then be successful and that they can fully perform.
yeah, right.
You
Because
know, like
I feel
it's,
like these disabled actors are now going out on stage, and who's got their back
yeah.
is where I always thought I would come in eventually.
Yeah. Well, what do you want to do? Okay, so you have had all of these experiences then with costume design, and in general, you do all kinds of creative things. And I've seen some paintings that you've done, and you have a whole series that you've done of individuals with disabilities and with their different adaptive aids and things that I think are really beautiful. But what would you like to be doing?
Well, I'm enjoying the painting now.
Yeah.
Kind of took from going from renderings to finished artworks that I've been painting now, and developing the disability culture that I feel like is missing in the
Hmm.
world on a level that I can manage in my own home and not be dependent on a whole crew to
Okay.
realize the big picture of the art of getting the costumes on the stage.
Yeah. So we just need to help then. So for you to continue to be creative and do that through paintings where you don't necessarily need some of those outside resources and you can still just do amazing things.
That's the current plan.
I like it. Okay. Well, Mallory, thank you for taking a little bit of time to chat with me and just share some of your experiences and some of the work that you've done in costume design and, of course, advocating for others with disabilities. I think there's a lot of really great creative things there, and I think we can all continue to work together and support each other to have that truly inclusive environment and let everybody shine with their talents. So, thank you for coming and chatting with me about your own experiences.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Gorilla HR podcast, and we look forward to having you listen again soon.
That's it for this episode of the Gorilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@gorilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time.